We just had a new name get attributed to us, and it's called the Jedi Masters of Launchery.
BGS Program Chief Engineer, verifying no constraints to launch.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
Welcome to space.
For over 20 years, NASA's Launch Services Program has been the workhorse of uncrewed spaceflight, enabling exploration of Pluto, the Sun, the Earth, and other worlds. Next on the Rocket Ranch. All right, I am here in the booth now with Amanda, correct me if I get this wrong, I'm sorry, Mitskevich? Mitskevich, I'm sorry.
That's right, that's pretty close.
And Chuck Dovale. So Amanda, Chuck, thanks for joining me.
Great to be here.
Yeah, good to be here.
So Amanda, you are, the title is manager for the Launch Services Program, is that correct?
It depends on what piece of paper you look at. I'd say program manager of the NASA Launch Services Program, or director of launch services, or it's been many things.
Okay. Yeah. And then Chuck, your specific role is?
Deputy program manager, or number two.
Number two.
Right.
I've heard that's your name. I've
Yes.
also heard, Amanda, somebody told me, I think the story goes that you stole Chuck's desk at some point. Is that an accurate telling of the story?
Not
Well,
just
not
my desk, the
really.
whole office,
No,
which was a precursor.
no. I was
Or
given
borrowed
his
it.
desk by the boss because he was gone for several months, and I didn't have anywhere to sit. So I got his desk.
She didn't turn
And
it
that's
down.
how it started. Yeah. I didn't turn it down, right. It was a whole, so here I was coming over there to this new job thinking I was going to be in some little cubicle, and I get this great big office of a branch chief. I'm like, this is great. I'll take it.
I was on a source board. I came back and my door's open. I was like, oh. And it's like, oh, there's someone in my. And Marie Lugo says, hey, here's who I gave you the office to. I'm like, so should I find another job?
All right, so it's pretty obvious that you two go a good ways back. So let's kind of walk back. If you would each kind of just tell me a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are today, because you have a pretty cool job, but you didn't get there overnight.
No. You want to
True.
start, or you want me to start?
You could start.
Me start. Okay. Let's see. So I started out there. How long do you want me to go back here?
Let's go with what's your degree in?
2 hours worth? Or,
How about
okay.
there? Yeah, no, not quite that long.
Okay, not that long. So I graduated from Georgia Tech a long time ago. I won't say what year, with an industrial engineering degree, which is way different than what most people at the Space Center have or had at the time. And I started in shuttle, in logistics, actually. And I went from logistics, after about 5 years in logistics, I got my master's at UCF in engineering
Go Knights.
management. Yeah, go Knights, yeah. Go Jackets, I should have said that. And so I got that degree, and then I went to shuttle operations, where we started up an industrial engineering group that was helping improve shuttle ops. And then from there, I went to be an intern on the 4th floor. It was the 4th floor at that time. It's the 7th floor now.
Yeah, that's our executive suite for
Exactly.
our center management.
Exactly, executive suite. So I went up there to be the intern to Roy Bridges, who was a newly appointed center director at the time. And while I was interning up there, the Launch Services Program, was transitioned down to Kennedy from Goddard and at that time Lewis, now Glenn, and partially Marshall. So it transitioned during that time, and when I finished my internship, I went over to, it wasn't called LSP then, it was called Expendable Launch Vehicles, I think. Is that right?
ELV.
Yeah, ELVs. So I went over there, which was I didn't even know that there was anything other than shuttle. When you were in the shuttle program, human spaceflight, pretty much everything is all about Johnson and Marshall and Kennedy, and you didn't even know there were science missions. There's those other launches on the Cape side.
And
I
you're
thought,
best kept secret over there.
yeah, like nobody even knew about it on the Kennedy side. And I thought, well, I'll try it, but I have no idea what I'm doing. It was Ray Lugo who convinced me to go over there. He was quite the recruiter. So I went over to there, and I helped transition the program, writing a bunch of the documentation, helping work with Goddard, moving things down to Kennedy. And then after that, I became a mission manager, where I got to work on some really neat missions, leading a mission team. And then from there, I went to be the chief of that office. And then from there, I went to be the deputy program manager, number 2 to Steve Francois. And then I became program manager after that. It was a path. It was a crooked path, a straight
It's a
path,
roundabout.
a roundabout way.
There you go.
But yeah, I have a great job now. It's really a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll come back to what exactly it is you do these days in just a minute, but Chuck, I want to hear from
Yeah,
you
what
first.
is it exactly you do?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Mine's a little bit straighter path. I started out as a summer student at the Space Center until I could get some engineering courses at the local community college, Brevard Community College at the time. and then I went on to UCF. Go Knights.
There you go.
But I was I got to be in the co-op program, so I would go to school for a semester, and then I'd work for a semester.
It's now called Pathways for those that might be interested.
Right. So in 1984, I got a call if I wanted to go work in the ELV project in the telemetry lab of Hangar AE, and I said, certainly. Especially after I looked up telemetry in the dictionary.
Say, whatever that was, the telemetry lab.
I said, yeah, that's me. So I've been in ELV ever since, and ELV has probably changed its names 3 or 4 times in the duration I've been there. So I started as a co-op student, finally graduated. It was a little bit lengthened because of being in the co-op program, but I became full-time in 1989 and worked missions, from day one, and just loved the diversity of all the different missions and projects and partners that we worked with, and being off the radar. Like Amanda had said, we were a small group back then and only did launch. And then, so I was working for about 10 years before the program started to transition, which was quite the step for us because we only knew the last 3 or 4 months of the entire mission flow. All we did was launch.
Right.
And we didn't fully understand what Lewis and Goddard were doing for years prior to that. We just knew they brought us their satellites and we launched them for them. So it was a big step to get the entire program. And being part of that group, we weren't really sure if we were equipped to do that. But Ray, had the foresight, and as well as a few other folks at headquarters that led the transition. And, we since have become LSP. We obviously recruited good people from Kennedy and Lewis and Goddard to form, what's been the nucleus of LSP. So it's been a great run since. I started as a systems engineer. I became a branch chief of the avionics group. I had the opportunity to become or shadow the launch director position, and then became a launch director and then senior launch director for 10 years, which I always say that's been and is the best job in LSP, if not the entire agency.
Number
and
two
then
is not the best job? Come on.
And then for whatever reason, I'm not quite sure, it's almost 10 years now, I left the launch director position to go to the front office. So, and that's that.
To make
The
room
rest
for
is,
others
yes,
to grow,
I
right?
paved the way
Right.
for Tim Dunn. Tim, if you're listening, it's been a while since you thanked me for getting out of your way.
So that's an interesting idea, the idea of rising up to get out of someone's way. Is that something that you say, or is that something that is really meaningful?
Actually, that's an interesting question because, excuse me, when I was the mission management branch chief or office chief, that's when Ray Lugo had an opportunity to go to Glenn Research Center and I think be the deputy center director there. And they talked to a bunch of us about applying for his position because they wanted to be able to get someone from LSP to be in that job. And so I don't think any of us really wanted to leave the jobs we had because we really liked them. But for me personally, I got to thinking about, well, I'm in this job that is supervising a bunch of mission managers who are looking at the mission teams, launching all these spacecraft. And if I'm not willing to take the next step forward, then I probably need to find a way to step aside so that somebody else can have my job, because probably it would make sense for me to try and help the organization at another level. I never envisioned doing that. And I think it took a lot of pressure from Ray at the time to get any of us to apply for that. But it was kind of a feeling of, I probably need to find a way to let other people come up through the program.
Yeah, it was the same for me. It was a factor that played into it. It was a tough decision for me because I truly loved the job I was in, and I felt like I was good at it. When you're asked to go to the next level, you have some doubts whether or not you can do that. And the safe thing to do is to stay where you're at, where you're successful. Mm-hmm. But part of it was, and I didn't know it was Tim at the time, was to really get out of the way of somebody else. I may have been holding someone back because I'd been in that position for 10 years. So because of that and other factors, it was time to move on. And it is gratifying to see how great Tim is in that job, and it makes me feel good that I joke about it's the one selfless thing I've done is I got out of the way to let Tim shine.
Yeah, I would say the same about Albert moving into the job that I had. He's done a way better job than I ever did in that position, and he's excellent at it. So if you give other people opportunities, then they definitely excel.
Yeah, it's awesome. And part of the reason why I asked that question of you both is because your reputation is pretty sturdy when it comes to being good leaders, and I think that that's something that can be overlooked. It looks like you're climbing a ladder, but I think that there's more to it than that, and I think that your answers speak to that, so I appreciate that. And obviously, you're kind of carrying the baton of a program with a pretty excellent 20-plus year history now. So give us kind of a really high level, here's what LSP does, and here's what we've done for 20 years.
So I'd go back to your opening statement. You said they've been launching uncrewed rockets. So we would rather, you said, we've been launching robotic spacecraft for the agency for 20 years because we don't want to be seen as a secondary to the human spaceflight and be called uncrewed, right? So,
My apologies.
No problem.
Certainly a fair point. And the reputation of the program is very strong as well. So I don't want to create the impression with anybody that there's second class there.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the program is about finding a way to find the right rocket that matches up with the right satellite for the right place to get them where they need to go. And we have spent 20 years building up expertise in all kinds of disciplines, in business disciplines and technical disciplines, rocket science disciplines, everything across the board, customer service, in order to be able to make that happen. And so I think our reputation now with our main customers who are Science Mission Directorate is that we do what we say we're going to do and that we help them find the ride to get to orbit.
I'll give Wanda Harding a shout out because she's the one that came up with that we are Earth's bridge to space. So we are truly serving our customers who need to get, either to another solar system, planet, Earth orbiting, and we're equipped in a lot of ways to make that journey for them, more successful, easier, a better experience all around for them.
Yeah. So I was going to say we just had a new name get attributed to us, and it's called the Jedi Masters of Launchery, and we thought that was really cool. That was from somebody totally not associated with the space program that was giving us a leadership talk, and that's what they think of us as.
Yeah,
and we thought
should
that was
have started
really cool.
with that.
Yeah.
We couldn't have come up with that on our own.
So as you think about carrying the baton now, what do you view your roles as? Because obviously you kind of have both, whether through a straight path or a more crooked one, have come up through the program where you were more in the weeds on specific things. So at this high level of director or manager and number two, what do you do functionally?
Let's see. It doesn't really fall into one clean bucket of things that we do. I think what we try to do is work with the entire team to set a vision for where we want to head, and then
get out of the way.
Get out of the way is exactly right. So our goal really should be to work like 6 hours a day or something, because everybody else knows what they're supposed to do and they do all the work for us. I think we clear the way a lot of times for folks to be able to do their job. We do a lot of the high-level interfacing to make sure that people understand what we do, and we always seem to be struggling with what is launch services, like the question you asked, what do you guys even do? On a day-to-day basis, though, it's really hard to say what you do, right? You're solving problems, and people have questions, they're wandering by. We're big proponents of being in the office and being accessible to people. Anybody can come by and ask questions, and we'll talk with them about any of their issues that they have going on. I don't know.
Most days the calendar's full,
right?
But there are other days where it's not full, and we're certainly not sitting around. I mean, there's a lot of drive-bys, as we call them, but there's a lot of new work and different work than what was there 20 or even 10 years ago in the program, which was we were responsible for one mission end to end to get that satellite in orbit. We've grown so much in our expertise that we're asked by a lot of different parts of the agency to do different things. So we have a whole advisory role that we play, and that could be with the CRS program, or it could be with an international partner that's working through Goddard, let's say. And some of it is 1 or 2 people are working on that project, or 10 or 12 are working on it, and then we've got 40 on a primary mission. So there's such a variety now than when the program started that every day is different.
Can you give me kind of a feeling? So 2 things. Obviously, Chuck, you mentioned the team used to be a lot smaller than it is today. So how big is your whole team? And kind of talk me through what's the process look like from when a mission hits your radar to launch? And I guess beyond that, if you guys have a responsibility beyond launch.
So civil servants, we have a matrix, not just,
Probably about
within
250 civil servants. And that's across every element, public affairs, contracts,
Sure.
resources,
Procurement,
procurement,
right.
engineering,
And then about
safety, mission
200
assurance, and
200
then about 200
contractors.
So about 450 total. And we really operate badgeless. So when you ask the question about how many civil servants there are, we have to stop for a second and think, okay, I know there's 450 people in the program, so you subtract, I think there's about 200 on contract, so we got about 250 civil servants.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and then we have right now we have over 70 missions that are being processed. So 450 might sound a lot to
That's 70
somebody.
future missions.
Right.
Like 70,
Yes.
so not counting everything you've
From
done.
Icon forward would be
all the
70 missions.
ones that are yet to launch. So
Right.
that's a lot, and it like I said, it varies from, it's a 4 to 7 year process, and we've been in on the ground floor all the way through post launch and making sure, even after it's separated, that it's a success, to just a couple of people supporting JWST across the pond because they've been asked by Goddard for some expertise, or just sit in on a review and lend an ear just to see if things are going well.
That 70 doesn't even include the CubeSats, though, right? So if you add,
Right.
we have 45 CubeSats waiting to be manifested, and there's about 40 that are on the manifest to fly. So there's even
Correct.
more. Yeah.
All right, so now let me ask you to go ahead and kind of dive in. So what's the process look like? Because obviously, we're not talking about 70 missions flying next year.
Right.
So there's a long process, a long lead time here. So from start to finish, LSP, and we kind of have to generalize here because I know some missions are different than others. There's the
Sure.
CubeSats, there's advisory. So
Sure.
like
So-
a full-fledged NASA science mission,
Okay.
what's that look like start to finish?
Okay. So like Mars 2020
Sure,
or
great
something
example.
like
Yeah, coming
that.
up
Right,
next
right.
year. Obviously,
Right.
I'm really excited for you guys. It's another
Yeah.
rover similar to Curiosity.
With a helicopter on it.
With a helicopter on board.
That is
Yeah,
really
it's going to be
cool.
awesome.
Amazing.
That's going to be awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So the process, I'll go through, and you just jump in if you don't mind, so that I don't keep it too boring. So because I'm an industrial engineer, it's got to be processes. So early on, there's a science concepts that the science mission director works with decadal surveys, and they figure out what do we want to achieve in the next decade for certain types of science. And so they decide what the science is. Then they usually put out an announcement of opportunity that says, hey, we have the science we want to do, bid to it. And so people come in, they bid to it, and during that process is when we start. So we provide an assessment of what launch vehicles might be in the market at the time that these spacecraft are going to fly. This is it could be 5 to 8 years before they're going to launch. So this is a process way in advance. And if you think about our current launch vehicle market, we don't really even know what's going to be flying in 5 years right now, right?
Yeah,
the
it's a crazy time right now.
Right, exactly. Because we just finished Delta II. Atlas V is on its way out for Vulcan, and Blue Origin hasn't flown their New Glenn. So you're trying to predict, based on what you have on contract and based on the market, what to put in these announcements of opportunity so that the scientists can see what vehicles they might be flying on. So that's really where our first entry point is in the process. And that's usually done by Albert Sierra's group and the mission management group. And so we start doing that. And then as that process works through, they eventually down select, they pick a spacecraft, And then at that point, we start working with the spacecraft more directly to pull together what the requirements might be so that we can put a rocket out for bid.
And when you say requirements, give me a general idea of what does that mean?
So like the interfaces between the spacecraft and the launch vehicle. We'll say your spacecraft is X mass. Right.
Where it's going.
Dimensions, where it's going. Yeah, where it's going, very
mission
important.
peculiar purges or
Yeah.
the size, can it fit in the common fairings that the vehicles have.
Right. Right. So we start gathering all that information with them, letting them understand what rockets can provide, and they're telling us what their spacecraft is supposed to do. We help them sometimes with design iterations because they may not know exactly how to
Sure.
design something, because a lot of them have never been through the process before. So we provide that stable interface for them so that we can give them the knowledge that we have. So they go from that point where they're telling us what they might want, and then we take all the requirements, we put them out for bid to the contractors that we have on this indefinite delivery contract. We put them out for bid. Bidders bid. We go through a process 6 or 8 months to be able to select the right rocket. And then we make that selection, and then we work with them from that point, which is usually about 24 to 30 months before their launch. So that's when they're coming through their design process, and they're trying to finalize their design so that they can, I think it's at the CDR point normally is when we make that selection. So they're working at that point to then start building their spacecraft. And so it's really important they know what rocket they're going to be flying on, so they make sure they encompass the exact right environments that they're going to have.
And most of them are one of a kind, so it's truly like
Right.
the first iteration of it. So it's not like a communication bird where there's a production line. So
Sure.
they all are almost all unique, other than GOES and TDRS, which is as close to a repeat mission as we get. Everything else is extremely unique. So how it fits, or if it fits in the fairing, how it fits, how are you going to purge it, where the doors are located, all of those are like, we do it for the first time each and every time.
But so that also brings up another important point to interrupt the whole process. Part of it is that because each one is unique, and the timeline that we talked about, 5 to 8 years out, some of these principal investigators have been working on the science for these missions their entire time that they have started through college and through their career. So it could be 40 years.
Yeah.
Gravity Probe B, the guy working on it was, I don't know, it was literally 40. His whole life, pretty much, he had been
Wow.
working on the mission. So it's really, for us, it's really important that we do a good job of overseeing what's going on with the launch vehicle and making sure that spacecraft can integrate, because you can't afford to lose that mission.
As if it's not pressure enough to be
Right.
successful at
Right.
launch. This guy
Right.
has
This guy has
devoted
spent his whole life on these
to
missions.
this mission.
Right.
Does that feel personal when you think about
yeah,
hey, you're
absolutely.
in charge of a program that's trying to get this guy's life work into space?
Yeah.
Yes,
that
absolutely.
particular one was noteworthy for that reason.
Yeah.
And then also George Morrow of Goddard used this analogy one time in our offsite. He said, it's like we have a baby at Goddard, and we've nurtured it, but now it's time for us to give it up. And we're nervous about that, and we're handing it off to you, and we need to know that you're going to care for it like we did. And so that hit home. It wasn't like it was lost on us, but just that analogy was very, very tangible.
Yes.
And I think it's stayed with us. Thanks, George.
So we mentioned Mars 2020 coming up here really soon. So thinking about other babies you're going to have handed off to you or are in the process of taking, what are the ones you're excited about? So obviously thinking a couple years out, what are you looking at?
I think we have 9 or 10 in the next 24
18,
months.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. Maybe a little one to look forward to before all of those big ones start is Virgin Orbit.
Okay.
We've been working with them for a while to get a small launch vehicle capability in place. We had Rocket Lab Electron launch in December of last year. That was the first government launch on an Electron, and it was really exciting for us.
Congrats. That was a good one.
Yeah, it was really neat. And so our next one would be Virgin Orbit. That is a rocket that's launched under an airplane, and we have some CubeSats on that to test that out. So we're hoping to see that towards the end of this year as well, sometime after ICON. For me, I really am looking forward to Mars 2020. I don't want to beat that to death, but it is really cool. So I just talked to someone on the phone about it, and they said that the scientists are maybe not so excited about this helicopter because there's no science that has to do with the helicopter.
Interesting.
Yeah, but there was a whole report on NPR recently that all they focused on was the helicopter because it's so exciting, and it's really neat. It'll be really neat.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, just track the public interest with
right.
that when it, gets up there and starts tooling around there.
Right.
Yeah. It'll be pretty cool.
I
So
think
for
the
me, I'm
other
looking forward
the
to
other
that.
aspects are the missions that we've worked on that are, still in the public eye and returning science and stuff. We even had, someone in the organization in a meeting yesterday, and she talked about how excited she gets when she's listening to the radio or NPR and they start talking about like OSIRIS-REx and she's like, oh, I remember that. We launched that, and it's
cool.
about to, it's around Bennu and it's about to go in for the sample in about a year. So it's those kinds of things. Parker going to the sun and being able to talk. So when we have outreach opportunities, those are the fun things. People love planetaries and stuff, but all of the exciting missions, there's always something that excites the public about the science.
Yeah.
Landsat, we've got a few Earth observing coming, either ocean or land. Those are coming. Those are pretty popular too.
Solar Orbiter in February. That's an international partnership that we have, and so the U.S. provided the rocket, and the European Space Agency is providing the spacecraft. So that one's going to be pretty exciting. We'll have a lot of visitors here that are going to see their spacecraft finally launch. This one's been on contract for a really long time. They've been working really hard on it, and they're really looking forward to February's launch.
Yeah.
It'll be neat.
As I think back on kind of the more recent history of rocketry and what looks like it's coming in the future, the near future, it seems like there's a huge shift in the landscape of available rockets. Obviously, the launches themselves get people excited, and it feels like we're going to have a very different pool of rockets here in the next couple of years. Is that accurate, and how does that impact you all in your work?
I think it's very accurate. In fact, we're in our on-ramp period for our contract. So once a year, we allow new bidders to come in and join the contract.
Okay.
They have to then bid for each and every mission. So
Sure.
they're just getting the right to be on the contract at this point. And some years go by where there's nobody interested in joining. We've got
A record number.
Yeah,
It's-
I'm going to
it's
say
like
record
five or
number. We
six.
probably can't
Oh,
five
wow.
or six
beyond
new
that.
rockets. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
So
Did
that
you
tells
say
you
you
about
can't tell me beyond that?
We can't
You-
probably
We
talk
can't probably talk about
numbers
the
or
actual bidders, but yeah.
Like honestly, those kinds of things are really exciting for me when it's
Yeah.
like we have a lot in the mix we can't talk about.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yes.
that's awesome.
Yeah, we're popular right now. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so it probably is almost unprecedented in terms of how many new rockets are going to be out there, and all different of the vehicle classes too. So we talked about Rocket Lab, we talked about Virgin Orbit. You think about Blue Origin's bringing on the new Glenn, which is going to be a huge capability. ULA has had rockets for many years between Boeing and Lockheed. They've got a new rocket coming online. Northrop Grumman has a new rocket coming online. Firefly's a new company that just took over the Delta II complex out at Vandenberg that's going to be launching rockets.
you have brand new ones and then incumbents that are changing their.
Right. It's a
rockets.
pretty amazing collection of what we're going to have. Now, I'm not sure how many satellites are out there to be launched on all of these, so we'll have to watch and see which one actually makes it, which ones actually make it.
Sure.
Yeah.
So is there growth for LSP beyond simply volume of throughput, or is that really how LSP grows into the future?
That's a good question. I think when we think about LSP, classic LSP, it's really, and it still is, the core of our business are the science missions. I mean, that's why we exist, that's why we started. But the agency has expanded into so many other areas that are now using commercial rockets that it may not necessarily be the throughput of missions that we buy end to end, but the throughput of the type of service that we provide the agency is growing. So if you look at the new Artemis program, Boots on the Moon 2024, going to Mars, we're right now in the throes of teaching people what LSP does who don't usually deal with LSP and don't know what we have to offer, so that we can make sure that we provide some service for their launch vehicles.
So let me ask this question, because when I know pretty well what LSP does, and when I heard Moon 2024 and saw some of the manifest imaging, some of the plans, I was like, I think LSP is about to get busier. Did you all feel similarly?
Well, I think we felt, boy, I hope we're going to get some of that work because they are purchasing them a different way than normal. They're buying an end-to-end service where typically science will come to us with their spacecraft and then we'll go buy them a launch vehicle. In this case, they're having the spacecraft portion of it buy the entire service. And so what we are trying to manage is how do we still provide our mission assurance on a rocket that is being bought a different way. And so we are a little bit concerned. We had a strategic offsite with management in May, and we talked about how busy we're getting. And we don't really want to grow the organization in size. We'd rather become more efficient at things and then use the resources that we have to be able to do the work on the new programs. But there's a ton of work. I'd say, like you said, that manifest, the number of commercial rockets on there is incredible. And they're all going to be new rockets. The only one right now that has flown really is the Falcon Heavy, right? And it's only flown 3 times. There are no other rockets that are capable of taking these big masses to the moon right now, other than SLS, of course.
Right.
But if there's one group that has the expertise and knowledge of either, the current rockets or, the derivatives, it's us. So we're a capability that should be used and should be a big part of it in our minds. But we do have to balance that work with, the science, which is why we're really here.
Right.
Cool. So as you both individually look to the future, is there something else? Is there another level up? Is there
That's not a fair question.
What does it look like when the need arises to move out of the way again?
Oh boy, then maybe it's retirement time. I don't know.
Well, one of the things that comes up a lot now in these strategic offsites that we have is because a large majority of the management within LSP all started together 20 years ago. We're all close to retirement age together. And so the discussion quickly turns to, we can't talk about when people are going, but it's definitely something that's on the agenda of succession planning because we are all able in the next 5 years. And if there's a mass exodus, what are we leaving behind? Are we leaving and educating the people behind us well enough for them to take our place and keep the program running like it is? So that's a constant agenda item at our meetings now.
I honestly think I have like the best job in the agency, and I don't see why you would want to go anywhere else. I mean, where else can you work with all the science missions, all the customers that we have, all the people that we interact with, the NRO, the Air Force, everybody? Every day is a challenge. So I see it as, well, sometime in that 5 years, maybe there's some changes in LSP, but we'll see.
I've been in ELV my whole career. I'm certainly not going to change now. So I'm saying it's given me a lot.
Yeah.
So all I'm doing now is
so maybe I'm
going
to be selfish. I'm not going to step out of the way right now.
Well, very good. I thank you both very much. Obviously, you guys put in a ton of time and effort. I'm sure blood, sweat, and tears.
Oh, yeah.
So good luck the next 18 months or so, especially.
Yes.
Obviously, we'll be keeping a close eye on your work as new and improved rockets take flight.
All right.
Sounds great. Thanks, you.
Joshua.
Thanks for having us.
I'm Joshua Santora, and that's our show. Thanks for stopping by the Rocket Ranch. And special thanks to our guests, Amanda Mitskevich and Chuck Dovale. To learn more about LSP, visit nasa.gov/launch services. And to learn more about everything going on at the Kennedy Space Center, go to nasa.gov/Kennedy. Check out NASA's other podcasts to learn more about what's happening at all of our centers at nasa.gov/podcasts. A special shout out to our producer, John Sackman, our soundman, Lauren Maythree, editor, Michelle Stone, and special thanks to Mary McLaughlin. And remember, on the Rocket Ranch, even the sky isn't the limit.